Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 66 of The Captain's Heart. What? Jeremy asked with a chuckle, roll of meat with a vegetable paste at its center. Ah, to his lips. The last week of issues with the toilet had caused him to visit medical, where tests that showed he was deficient in a series of nutrient Kelsirians didn't need in as large quantities. Instead of handing him pills to deal with it, after a quick search, they had a list of dishes he needed to make his mainstay. He needed more vegetables in his diet, they told him, and those had vegetables-based pastes instead of the protein-based ones many of the selections contained. The list had been long enough. He'd been able to replace all the flavors with something that had vegetables in it. And it's going to have to be reworked in the second draft. Too many vegetables shows up too often. I'm going to have to change that. Just enjoying the view, his heart replied, smiling. Feels more like you're paying attention when I'm looking at other people. No, you don't have to worry, right? I'm not going to. I know, Gralgiran said gently. He took his hand. You don't need to constantly reassure me. I trust you, Jer. He chuckled nervously. Sorry, it's just that with how... He couldn't voice it. Even now, after reminding his friends and sometimes strangers, all the flirting made him feel like he was expected to cheat on his heart. I know, Gralgiran repeated in the same tone. You don't have to worry either. He squeezed his heart's hand. He hadn't realized how much he needed the reassurance. What's the plan for you today? And any any large administrative any large administrative tasks to keep you from getting bored? I'm on power distribution supervision again. He couldn't keep the derision out of his voice. Don't diminish the work. Every position is important to a properly running ship. As for me, we're still a few days away from our destination, so I won't know what will have to be done until we have scans of the area. But I need to make sure we're ready for all eventualities. That's what the quartermaster gave you, right? When Gralgiran only nodded, he added, You were expecting it, right? I mean, he works for you. You the hunter, I mean. Gralgiran laughed. No, he doesn't. Not officially, at least. What does that mean, not officially? His art ate 3 of the meat cylinder dipped in the spicy sauce they shared before answering. We have networks, people in places to hear information that can help our hunts or even start them. And some of them are within groups the leadership considers undesirables, since they are the best placed to learn of criminal activities that might impact Kelser as a whole, like those vanished ships. He nodded. Most of those are people we rescued, and they pay us back by informing us. The way you rescued Zinial Halan. Not exactly. I didn't know who he was when I rescued him. The hunt I was on happened to take me past the village he'd been abandoned in. I saw the fighting and intervened. Alone? Without a pack? Jeremy asked suspiciously. From conversation with Toruk and his heart, he picked up a bit about hunter procedures, and one of their core tenets was that they acted as packs. The female I was tracking was alert for hunters, so the pack hung well back. It was easier to pass myself off as a tourist if she ambushed me on my own. So you rescued him, but he didn't get you information? But he doesn't get you information? He does, but not because I rescued him. I didn't learn he was Tahalan until he'd made himself quartermaster. Wait, made himself? Don't positions that capitalize the name have to be earned through academies and some such? Quartermaster is a fully civilian position, so how someone ends up in charge is handled differently. the planet where he was abandoned wasn't one I could leave him on and not have to worry about Zenila Haran meddling in my life in ways I don't want. Because, for as much of an annoyance as Zenil Tahalan can be, he wants to earn his keep. He convinced the quartermaster to employ him. The female retired the next time we were at Kelsir, and he was her recommendation for the position. I had no reason to go against her wishes, so I let it stand. You let the guy who drives you nut in a position have a position of authority? Didn't occur to you he might have arranged things? If anyone arranged anything, it's his namesake, and I hadn't had reason to interact with him until then. More than once, I've considered leaving him at a station for some of the things he's done. And you haven't? Because each time it's becoming a serious consideration, he'll hand. He'll hand me something like this, which will either play a crucial part in bringing a hunt to an end, or put me on the scent of something that would have had serious repercussion for our people. His namesake makes sure Xenial Tahalan earns his right to stay. And that's helping you with the ships. I trust that it will. And because of that, he's staying out of the cells for somehow having information on a hunt I hadn't filed. Do you have to... His tablet buzzed. The reminder shift was going to start soon. As a technician, he couldn't afford to be late to work. I need to get to work. He took his heart's hand and rubbed his cheek against it. I'll see you after shift. Have a good one. Gralgiran called after him. He tapped the screen, then brought up the slider to adjust the power to that section of the civilian quarterdeck. Even before he had the slider where he wanted it, he knew something was off. The power wasn't adjusting accordingly. At a glance, he had to send 30% more to the deck to meet the demand he was seeing. He brought up a different screen, entered commands, and confirmed the power running through the regulator he controlled matched the reading. Another set of checks, and he had the culprit. One of the capacitor banks was eating power. He called up the location and had to stop himself from starting to divert power away. This wasn't how things were done. It still rank that he couldn't just fix the problem, but all he had to do was remind himself that short of an emergency situation, he too preferred to be told what was happening instead of having to attack it, just handle it. A look over his shoulder showed him the engineer was at the reactor, changing circuits. If Jeremy had known, the boards could be brought up powered up or down. Individually, he would have been able to get the reactor working much faster. He wanted to blame Turek for not telling him, but he hadn't even asked. He'd taken for granted that the entirety of the reactor as a whole was a whole because that was how he built his. He brought up the engineer messaging system. Engineer, there is a power drain on the 33rd capacitor bank. He attached information, locked the screen to a tab, and continued to work, trying to put the situation out of his mind. The engineer would decide how and who would handle it. His job was to see to it the rest of the sections had the power they needed to function properly. Menial work. He couldn't keep from mentally complaining. But work that needed to be done. Work he needed to do well. If he wanted a chance, the engineer would treat him with the seriousness needed so he could... What is the situation, Technician Jeremy Bradshaw? The engineer asked. A defective capacitor, engineer. He brought up the tab. We're losing around 30% of the power. We need... He stopped himself. Not his job. The engineer consulted his tablet. In an hour 18, divert their power requirement to bank 94, 113, and 215. Then see to their replacement. I'll have a set ready. Jeremy kept himself from commenting through pure will. The 74rd guy considered him. had it tilt to an ear, and spoke. You have an opinion? There was no judgment on the tone, but Jeremy knew better than to take for granted this wasn't a test. Why wait? Getting the capacitor here only takes 5 minutes, so it's enough time for me to divert the power to the other banks. Then I can do the changeover, 20 minutes at most, and we have everything back to normal. And what happens to the power of those residences if a technician needs to make adjustment to those banks in the meantime? So they're going to have power fluctuations for a bit. That's nothing horrible. The engineer considered him. I doubt those inconvenienced family will feel the same. 1 hour 18. In 1 hour 18, most of those families will be away, and the power requirement will be low enough. Any shifts in the banks they now depend on shouldn't be noticed. Again, Jeremy kept his mouth shut through willpower. But this time the engineer's expression was darker, and when he spoke, his tone carried a restrained annoyance. You have another opinion. Forced himself to keep his tone neutral. This wasn't an argument. This was him explaining a point. In that hour, how much antimatter are we going to be waste to that power leak? You can't tell me that making it is so inexpensive you're willing to throw it away like this. That is my decision to make. Don't we work for the ship? Jeremy asked, unable to keep his frustration out of his voice. Don't the owner have something to say about paying for waste like that? I report to the captain. Yes. Are you suggesting that those families should be inconvenienced just so he can save a handful of kron? It's not going to be for that long, Jeremy insisted. Did Jimmy search his face? And when he spoke again, the tone was surprisingly gentle. Technician, we Kelsirians value our comfort above whatever profit might come from whatever transient discomfort they would incur. I understand Earthers see things differently, but you are among us. So I ask that you keep that in mind when you feel work needs to be rushed. He smiled. And when you see your heart, you should ask him what the priorities of a hunter ship are. Profits are not among them. Once the time has elapsed, divert the power and see to the replacement of the capacitor bank. Until then, you have work to do, technician. And that concludes chapter 66 of The Captain's Heart. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is up on Ream Story. And if you are looking to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.